Good afternoon. My name is Dimitris Bendilas, and I'm a software engineer and Scrum Master at Transifex. And today I'm going to talk to you about quality standards and how we handle them in the company. So, bad code is bad. You can quote me on this if you like. I think it's true, and I believe that you also do. And by bad code here, I mean code that is, it works, it does what is expected to do, but is not well written. So it has various other issues. And I'm pretty sure that all of the developers in the audience, that you have come across code that was like that. It was badly written. You couldn't understand, what was happening and how to work on this piece of software. And for many reasons. Maybe it was huge classes or method names that made no sense, or variable names with one or two characters short, or a complete lack of documentation, or not so good documentation, and so on. And the strange thing is that although everybody hates working on code like that, we sometimes, or often maybe, write code like that. And this has a lot of implications, right? It's really not fun to work like this. It's frustrating. You cannot be efficient and effective on what you do. And there are delays and many bad things in general. And the same goes for processes that live around coding. For example, code reviews. Where in these cases, you either have badly designed processes or you don't have any processes at all. And more or less, everybody does whatever they want, or however they like it. And in the end, it's again the same thing. You cannot work effectively. And there's another thing. So it's not only badly written code, but it's also code that is very different among your code base. If you have worked on large code bases, this is very common. And it's not easy to work because it's sort of a context switching. Every time you see the same problem solved in a different way or a different style or different formatting and so on. So in Transifex, we wanted to do something about these problems. And we wanted to stop relying on certain individuals that cared about quality and try to push things forward on themselves, let's say, and make this, create an official policy in the company, make this a norm, and sort of inject quality, let's say, into our DNA as a team. So about 1 year ago, we created a team which we call the Quality Standards Committee, and we started by gathering all the existing guidelines that we had, and we had quite a few, but they were all over the place. Wikis, emails, Slack, offline discussions. And so we gathered them in one place, and we refined them, and we threw away some that were obsolete, and we wrote some new ones. And then we tried to come up with a framework that would allow us to actually, implement these guidelines and make sure that everybody in the engineering team follows them in our everyday work. And aside from wanting to tackle our technical debt and wanting to create a better product through this process, we also cared about something else that is very important to us, and that is to create a more respectful environment. Because, well, if you think about it, in some sense, when you're creating code that is not good, you're not being very respectful to your colleagues because they'll have to work on that code sooner than later, and you're going to give them a hard time. And we wanted to make sure that everybody in the team felt that their time and effort is really appreciated and respected. And we wanted to make it sure that this becomes the norm in the company. So the major output of the committee, the team, is a document which you call the Transifex Engineering Manifesto, or TEM. And it's meant to be a single point of truth, a common point of reference for everything that has to do with quality around engineering. And it's a collection of guidelines, processes, best practices, and guidelines around software engineering. And when we wrote the first version of this document back in December, we gathered all the team, every engineer, and we presented their work, and we explained, the rationale why we are doing this, and what are the goals, what we're trying to achieve. And then we asked for everyone's feedback and contribution, because for us, for the company, it's very important that everybody is involved. And it's this document, these guidelines, is sort of an agreement between all the engineers, and we wanted everyone to be involved in this. And then we asked from everyone to read it and then start applying it the next day. Of course, things like that cannot happen from one day to the other. But the idea was that if there was any disagreement, let's say, any difference in opinions on how to do something, if this topic was covered by the TEM, then everybody knew what we should do. There's no time, of course, to go through everything that the document contains, but I'm going to give you an overview. So we have some best practices around coding. And the idea here is that the developers spend much more time reading code than writing code. So it should be very easy to understand and read and work on. So we pay a lot of attention to things like naming, how to name our classes and our methods and our variables, and why clarity is important, for example. And what are the semantics, and how, what's the mentality behind giving a name to something, right? We talk about documentation, how to write documentation inside the methods and classes, for example, and what should go there, what information is vital, and how this should be formatted, and so on. We talk about comments, when to write comments in the code, when to avoid them because they're not very helpful, and things like that. We have some guidelines about Git and GitHub. For example, how to name our branches, or what to write on a commit message. And why bug fix is a really lousy commit message, for example, and what kind of information should go there. And why traceability is important, so that every developer that comes across a change can go back, maybe 2 or 3 years back, and understand why this change was made, because this cannot be reflected in the code most of the time. We talk about code reviews, which are super important for us, and here we say that the reviewer's time should be respected, so the author should double check everything before sending a pull request for review. There should be no typos, there should be no debug log messages, or in general, it should be tidy and ready for review. And of course, all the guidelines of the theme of our document must be applied before sending something for review. And also, the author needs to provide a good context to the reviewer, because it's not hard. It's not easy to review someone else's code, the changes they make, without knowing how they thought about something and what is the problem, right? So we say you should explain the problem and the solution, and maybe why you chose that solution over something else, and maybe you should add some notes that are very important for the reviewer to know when doing the review. And on the other hand, the reviewers should take their job very seriously and make sure that they review the code thoroughly and follow some certain steps. So we have a checklist, and we say these are the things you should pay attention to. Things like performance, or things like security. So ideally, it shouldn't matter who does the review, as long as someone has reviewed a pull request. And also, there are some guidelines related to how we do Scrum, and for example, the definition of ready, definition of done, and one of the items in the definition of done is that all the guidelines from the document, from the TEM, are being followed. Okay, so how do we actually apply this in day to day? It all comes down to the engineers, right? because it starts with the authors that make the changes in the code, and then it goes to the reviewers, which it's where most of the magic happens. Because the reviewer has the authority to request changes from the author and can say things like, this class name doesn't make any sense. I don't understand what this does, or maybe it's misleading. I thought it was something completely different, or you have no documentation here. And I had to, I cannot understand what this method does without reading 50 lines of code. And the great thing here is that the reviewer does not have to rely on his or her authority, let's say, because there's also the authority from the TEM, from the guidelines. And this is very helpful in order to reduce the friction, because if the author disagrees, let's say something like, why should I add a docstring here? Well, the answer is because it's in the TEM, and that should be enough. That should end the discussion there. And if things don't go perfectly smoothly, and of course sometimes they won't, we have other tools. We have some tools to help us deal with this. So we have retrospectives, where, for example, the Scrum Master or the developer can say something like, hey, I worked on this feature, and it was on top of this new module that you guys created 2 weeks ago, and there was no documentation. I had to spend a whole day trying to figure things out. And the team should probably decide to take some action. Maybe do stricter reviews or whatever, raise the concern there. Okay, so how we maintain this? First of all, the TEM is a Google document, which was open to all of our engineers from the first day, so that we get a lot of comments and feedback and suggestions. And the Quality Standards Committee, the team, meets once every month, and we review all these suggestions, which are really great and really helpful, and they keep coming in. And we get, we make changes to the document, we refine some guidelines, we add some new ones that have come up, and we try to keep this very alive, right? So it doesn't fade out. I think on average, once every 2 months, we create a new version, let's say, of the document, and then send it to everyone in the team. And how has this been doing? Well, it's been less than a year, but it's really going very well. And most of the items in the document, in the guidelines, are very well adopted. We have a very high adoption rate. Some of them are not so adopted, and we're trying to figure out why and iterate and make changes. And but I think that we are getting better every day, and we get a lot of feedback from the team, as I said, and everyone is involved, and we try to make this better all the time. So now, what is the value that we have already collected from this? As a developer of myself, and from the big feedback I get, I really believe that it's easier you don't have to worry about as many things as before. Many things are more smooth now, and you can focus on what you do best, and you can get into the zone and just program and create stuff. And our code base is improving steadily. It's a big code base, so it takes time, but we're improving it a lot, and the new code that we write is much better. And we spend a lot less time going over stuff that is not very important, let's say. Things like, why don't we do it this way? Formatting, or something on the styling of the code, things like that. These are solved now, and we can move on with our lives and do what matters most. And in the reviews, I think there's less friction. So as I explained before, we just say, this needs to be changed, and so on, and this goes smoothly. And I strongly believe that we're becoming better programmers, everybody in the team. And also, this whole thing, this whole process is a great tool for onboarding for all the new members that come into the engineering team. From the first day, they know how we work and how everyone is supposed to work. And I think this is very good for a smooth transition. And sometimes I get asked, how do you manage to make this work? Because many people cannot imagine that in their team it will be smooth. Maybe they believe that there will be a lot of conflict among the engineers, for example. Well, there are a few key ingredients, I would say. First of all, we really are a great team, and respect is in our values, and teamwork is in our values, and I think that helps a lot. It's also important that many people care about quality a lot. So, it's sort of a loop. Everyone pushes everyone else, and this, pushes everyone forward together. And something else is that the management has really embraced this from the beginning. So it wasn't just a minority of people trying to push things around. It was really, we got all the help and all the support we needed to make this happen, and we still get it. And I think that's very important. And of course, this takes time. It started off very, very well, very enthusiastically. All the team was very, very enthusiastic about this idea from the very beginning. But, with time, we get even better. And I think, this is something that takes time. So, what's next for us? We keep improving. We keep refining our guidelines, adding new, with everything that comes up. We are considering to add more automation because sometimes, it's easy to get lazy or maybe forget some things, some guidelines. So wherever there's automation, I think that, it's really much easier to make you do what you're supposed to. And last but not least, we have discussed and decided to make the document public, make our term public. So we are working on this right now. And you should expect to see something from us soon. So stay tuned to the Transfex blog, and you'll probably see something very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. And questions from the crowd?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is, how can you fit the overhead of the reviews into the short time length of the sprint, let's say? What kind of sprints do you have? 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, and the second is, what would be different in this approach if you were a classical software development company with doing a waterfall? I mean, what are the key value-adding drivers because you are agile?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think something very important is that, well, as I showed before, the definition of done. It's a good tool. It's a great tool to make sure that you don't deliver something before it's actually delivered. So the fact that this guideline is there, I think is super important. Of course, it's just a bullet, let's say, so it may be easily forgotten, but it's there and it matters. It has a real weight there. And I think this, and also the fact that we do retrospectives, and the team actually is the agile mindset, maybe, because the team, the quality standards team, meets every once a month, which we just decided to do that. Maybe it needs more often or less often. We'll see about that. But we iterate and we make changes, and it's the whole mindset, I think.
We have time for 2 more questions. One at the back.
Hello. I have a question concerning reviewing. Do you believe that...
Can you speak up a bit, please?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I have a question concerning reviewing. Do you believe that part of the reviewing has to be done together with the development, with the developer, or just the reviewer to write the comments and then the developer just corrects them or asks questions?
Okay. What we do is we do this separately, let's say, so the reviewer reviews the code separately from the developer. But sometimes in big changes in the code, you need to consult, let's say, the developer and ask for some clarifications maybe or how they thought about something. But in these cases, although this is not an official guideline, I'm considering raising this up in the future. I think it's very important that you actually ask from the developer, from the author, to write this down somewhere, either on the pull request, on the description, or on the code itself. Because if if you don't understand something and you have to ask the developer, then the author, 6 months from now, someone else that views the code will also not understand. So everything that is a blank, you don't understand something, it's okay. I believe that you talk with the author, but this needs to be somewhere written down.
Great, and last question. There's one at the back, to my right.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I want to ask what happens if a team member doesn't follow this document. So there are many cases that people, developers, most, front-end developers, most, just want to use a fancy technology or something like that, and they try to convince the management to apply to the system. So what happens if you have some conflict besides the management and the team?
Okay, I cannot tell you from experience because we never had that conflict, but I can tell you that the way we tried to structure this was that it wasn't a single person that led this whole thing. It was a team of 3 people, myself and 2 other engineers, one from each Scrum team, and I think that this is important because it's not the authority, let's say, or the opinions of only one person. It's more than that. So it's easier for everyone, let's say, to agree in some sense, right? Because also the 3 of us do not agree all the time, right? But we get down and decide on something. We have to make a decision, and we choose what to create as a guideline. But if you don't have this mentality at all in the company, I really don't know how you can achieve something like this. Maybe, as they say, one bad apple may make the whole thing not work. But well, I think that if most of the people agree, and if you have at least some support from the management, I think it can happen. Maybe I think that the key is that everyone is involved in some way. I think that, I believe that people need to know that their voices are being heard, even though, the decision might not agree with everyone's opinion, which of course cannot happen. I don't know if this is of any use to you, but I think, if it's really, really bad, maybe it won't work.
And we have time for one last question before we bring Dimitri down.
Hi. Most of the things you said, you keep in this temp document, I understand can be automated in a pre-commit stage with some tool, or after you commit with a static analysis tool. Are you using any? And if yes, what parts are you tracking in that document that are besides this automated part?
Okay, sorry, I didn't get the whole thing. You talked about analysis, code analysis? Or?
Yeah, I was saying that most of the things I show in this bullet list you presented was about things you can figure out by running static analysis tools or tools that you can apply prior to your commit. Now, if you're using some of those, what parts are left out that you are tracking, let's say?
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're using some automated tools, but we could use a lot more, for sure. Well, I think that there are some things that maybe cannot be covered, like, I don't know, naming, for example. It's not easy to understand if you're giving a good name to your methods or classes, maybe. Documentation, of course, that can be automated. There are many things that can be automated, and we're gradually trying to add more automation, as I said. But I think that there will always be some qualitative aspects that cannot be or are not yet easy to find through that. And it's not okay if the tools that are automated they block the merging, then it's okay. But if they don't, and it's just a commodity, okay, let's run the analysis and then merge anyway, then it's about the mentality more.
Thank you, Dimitri, for that. A big round of applause, guys.